Hi, I'm Erin Lundy.
And I'm Madeline Walden, and this is
Aquarium of the Podcific,
a podcast brought to you by Aquarium of the Pacific, Southern California's largest aquarium.
Join us as we learn alongside the experts in animal care, conservation, and more.
Welcome back to Aquarium of the Podcific.
I'm Erin Lundy, Conservation Coordinator for Mammals and Birds and Animal Care Specialist.
And I'm Madeline Walden, the aquarium's digital content and community manager. Erin, what are we going to learn about today?
I'm pretty excited. We're going to learn about something I know next to nothing about, which is jellies.
Jellies?
Jellyfish. Jam, peanut butter.
Jellies, jam,
sandwiches.
Yum.
I don't know why they're not called jellyfish. I know that we often correct the way that we speak about them to say jellies rather than jellyfish, and I think it has to do with what is a fish, which is actually a surprisingly existential question for an aquarium to ask.
Yeah, is a jellyfish a fish?
We do get asked that question a lot. Why are sea stars not called starfish? Why are jellies not called jellyfish? And to be honest, I actually don't know the answer to that question. So thankfully we have an expert here.
An expert on today.
His full birth name is Jelly Josh.
Jelly Josh.
I'm lying, but wouldn't that be cool?
That's what we call him, at least.
Affectionately so, although I'm not sure how affectionately he takes it.
How affectionately it's received.
But Jelly Josh, Josh is our resident jelly expert. He has raised many of our jellies from conception, birth, whatever it is that jellies spawn. Again, I know next to nothing about jellies.
We're going to find out.
So thankfully, we have him on to answer all of our burning jelly questions.
Maybe a little bit burning, too, because those guys
sting. Some don't hurt, though.
Yeah, so we have jellies here at the aquarium where you can touch them, and a lot you can't touch, but you can actually touch our moon jellies out on Harbor Terrace, and technically they're stinging you. We just have very strong human skin. But if we were a teeny tiny brine shrimp, it would not.
It'd be over.
Oh, you'd feel it. Maybe not for long. But
I guess we don't really know a lot about what brine shrimp feel. We have a lot of questions.
We have a lot. I can't wait to get into it. Let's bring on Jelly Josh. Okay, welcome Josh to the podcast. Hi, Josh.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome.
What's your job here at the aquarium?
Thanks for announcing me as Jelly Josh, as we had prepared. So that would have led in.
I was gonna. All right, go ahead.
Cool. So yes, my job here at the aquarium is that I'm a senior aquarist. I'm in charge of cold water and temperate water jelly husbandry. So basically, I take care of the majority of the jellies we have here at the aquarium.
So you're Jelly Josh.
That is indeed my name.
Jelly Josh. I love alliteration. We had some alliteration at one of our other episodes.
We can't stop.
I think it was Water Weasel, and now we have Jelly Josh.
Thanks.
Josh, how long have you worked here?
I started out as an intern, so I'm going on about 12 years, which I've been with the Aquarium of the Pacific. Basically right out of college, or when I was a senior in college is when I got my internship. And then I continued volunteering because I thought it was a lot of fun, and eventually got hired part-time and then full-time. It was always kind of related to jellies, kind of randomly when I started. When I started as an intern, I really didn't know anything about jellies, except I liked them. I thought they were cool. I was kind of interested in keeping them at a home aquarium, so I bought a book to kind of learn about them. And they randomly placed me in my internship with the jellies, and just thought it was a lot of fun. So that's where I volunteered. I got hired as a part-time live foods aquarist, so basically the person in charge of making the food for the jellies. So I was still kind of attached to that department. And yeah, eventually kind of just worked my way up, and like I said, that was 12 years ago, and now I'm a senior aquarist and doing all the jelly stuff.
That's awesome.
Now you're Jelly Josh.
So what makes a jelly a true jelly?
So if you use the terminology true jelly, you get down to like what jellies you're talking about. There's different types of jellies. What we normally call jellies are what we call scyphozoans, hydrozoans, and ctenophores. Basically anything that kind of looks kind of blobbly in the water, that's a plankton, we kind of term jelly. Only the specimens that are under the scyphozoan family are actually true jellies, and those are like your moon jellies and your sea nettles and stuff like that. That's realistically true jellies. All the other ones are kind of false jellies. Hydrozoans, which if you're at the aquarium, those are the umbrella jellies, crystal jellies. Those guys are related to true jellies, but they're not true jellies. Scyphozoans are the true ones. Ctenophores, which are the comb jellies, are like not related at all, like nowhere near the same families. So
Why do we call them all jellies? Why do we lump them that way?
Because that's, I mean, it's an easy thing to do. Like common names, the common name is a moon jelly. It's just an easy thing to call them. So basically any plankton that's floating out in the ocean that has, like I said, it's, made of mostly water and jelly-esque look. We call
Kind
it
of looks like a jelly.
yeah, exactly. They'll call it a jelly or a jellyfish or whatever.
As a jelly aquarist, do you refer to them all by scientific name typically?
I don't want to sound like, a nerd, but I very much do, yeah.
So what is the scientific name of a moon jelly? Go.
That's Aurelia caerulea.
Ooh! Favorite name. That's what I'll say. That's my favorite jelly name so far.
Cool.
was really
Can I just spend the whole podcast just listing off?
Yes, I love that. I'm going to just put this.
Yeah, it's great. Listing off scientific names. I'm sure it'll be great for listeners.
I think this is a really fun quiz because I don't... What about a sea nettle?
The scientific name?
Yeah.
So they're all under the genus Chrysaora, but we have 6 different types here at the aquarium.
Oh my, he knows them too.
So, of course I know them. It's Acleus hovola, Fusescens, Colorata. We can do Queen Sincero. We can do...
Yeah, we can.
You can.
Yeah, we can.
We can do all these jellies.
Chinensis.
What is the difference between a jelly and a nettle?
So there's not really a difference. All nettles are jellies. It's one of those things like...
Square, rectangle, rectangle, square type thing.
No.
No.
I was wrong. I don't know.
All nettles,
Jellies.
all nettles are jellies, and all the jellies are nettles.
Okay.
That's just a very, or species of that belong to Chrysaora are sea nettles, which are jellies.
Got it. And you'll hear us refer to jellies as sea jellies or jellies and not necessarily jellyfish, correct?
You guys,
Yeah,
I will call them jellyfish because I do not care.
Jelly Josh calls them jellyfish.
Jellyfish,
my
Josh.
goodness.
Change the
Josh.
name.
Yeah,
But
change.
I guess the thinking behind our marketing efforts, at least, is that they're not technically fish. So why call them jellyfish?
Well,
Uh-oh.
Oh,
if you want to
school
go
us.
down
Yeah,
that,
let's go.
Wolf eels are not wolves or eels. It's actually a blenny.
Blaney.
So,
You're looking
what-
at me
what
like
do you
I
do?
named them.
What do you want me to do with
Why
that?
do
you name
why
them
did
that?
you do that?
Yeah.
The one thing that I learned pretty recently with amphibians is that they all have to be referred to by scientific name generally if you're talking to other, frog people, because the common names are often incorrect, just like jellyfish, just like things like that. So, like, we have spadefoot toads, which are not true toads. They are actually a type of frog. And so instead of calling them spadefoot toads, people who work with frogs will call them spadefoots because that's a little bit easier, or refer to them by the scientific names. And then Panamanian golden frogs are actually true toads. And so there's a lot of just common names can be really misleading. And I'm sure even more so when they're jellies because there's so many of them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. On some of the jellies, if I'll get new specimens in or new species that we haven't done before, like I will type in their scientific name on Google and they don't have a common name.
Wow.
So
No one's even talked about them before.
I'll, no one cares. No.
Oh.
But like, I'll have to like email other aquariums and be like, what would you guys call them? And see what the collective is.
Yeah.
So that you can name
And
them.
if no one, I'm just like, oh, this is the flip-flop jelly, and just so I can have a common name.
Oh, which one's the flip-flop jelly?
The purple ones.
What's the
Of
scientific
course.
name of the flip-flop jelly?
Flippius. Floppius.
Flippius floppius, the flip-flop jelly.
That's my favorite
They're
type of
purple.
jelly. They are purple.
Yeah.
So I have been lucky enough to go behind the scenes and spend time in the Jelly Lab. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens in the Jelly Lab?
So the Jelly Lab is just generally my backup work area. If you guys visit the aquarium, it's hanging out behind the Northern Jellies exhibit. And that area is where I do... I was like the majority of my work, which
Yeah.
is culturing the specimens. So the majority of the animals that we have on display are not collected from the ocean. They're actually cultured here in-house. And the reason we do that is because jellies generally don't have a very long life cycle or life stage. And so it would be really difficult to collect jellies, have them live long enough, and then go collect more and then collect more. It's not a great sustainable look, even though jellies are in no way, shape in danger in the ocean or in danger or anything like that. But it's just easier to have a consistent flow of strong animals going into our exhibits if we're culturing them. And so back there, I have what we call wet tables, which it looks like a table just full of water, which I house the cultures.
Perfectly named.
Yeah, didn't know that was a good joke. But yeah, so that's where I house the cultures, and that's where I'm rearing like our baby jellyfish, which we call Ephira is their fancy name. But yeah, and back there, so I'm rearing them up to display size. Generally speaking, the baby jellies or Ephira are about 1 millimeter. They're itty bitty, and so yeah, rearing them from there. So to eventually get them to display size, it takes about 8 months with a lot of species. So yeah, a lot of stuff is going on in the jelly lab.
What is their like developmental life cycle? Like when we see jellies, we typically see this sort of free floating jelly like thing, but what kind of goes into growing up into that?
So this is a lot easier when I have like something to like
A picture
point
to
out.
show, yeah.
So for all the
Now,
wonderful listeners,
paint us a
yeah,
picture.
you beat me to that joke. I said, picture this if you will, but so moon jelly, or well, I'll say moon jellies is the easiest thing to think about. So what we think of moon jellies, are what's called the Medusa stage, and those are those big blobs floating out in the ocean, collecting plankton. And those guys will reproduce kind of like corals, where they shoot their gametes into the water. Eggs will be fertilized by the sperm. Those will turn into larvae, which are microscopic. These larvae will actually swim around and try to find a place to settle. Which they'll do on any hard surface they can find. Generally, it's the open, the ocean floor, seagrass, rocks, whatever. And then that little larvae will turn into what's called a polyp. And that looks like a little miniature anemone. And so at this polyp stage, what they'll actually do is they'll start cloning themselves. And so you'll start with one polyp, and eventually it'll get to 50 polyps that are genetically identical. And then at that point, if there is a seasonal cue, and that's what the jellies kind of that's what tells them it's time to breed, or it's usually a temperature swing because of the seasons. And then that little polyp will actually kind of, so I was saying it looks like an anemone. It'll kind of drop its little feeding tentacles, and then start to metamorphosize and then chain up. And that single polyp will actually turn into about 25 little baby jellies that'll pop off, and then into the water column they go to grow. And at that point, they'll grow pretty rapidly in the open ocean because there's nonstop food and nonstop flow, and kind of grow up into become the Medusa stage, and then the process will repeat itself.
Do you ever hear something and then just go, I knew nothing about this? That's what I'm feeling right now, where I'm like generally feel pretty informed about what we're doing here and what our animals go through, and I didn't know any of that information whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're so different than anything else
very different.
that it's wild to hear about. Yeah, it just clones itself 50 times and makes 1 million of them out of one, and you're like, what is
Very
happening?
normal.
They're all clones. Don't worry about it. I'm like, what is happening? So that is very jarring to me, but in a good way.
It's very cool. As far as their general care, once they've kind of
Medusa'd.
How do you care for an animal with no brain? What goes into that?
Do you train them?
No. So their care, because they don't have a brain, is challenging. Yeah. Because like with fish in a fish tank, a fish is smart. It will swim to the side of a tank. It'll turn around and it'll come back. Jellies do not do that. So jellies just go with the flow. If a jelly finds itself in the corner of a tank, that's where it stays, because
That's where the flow is.
Yeah, it doesn't have a brain. It doesn't know any better. And so that provides a lot of challenges. And so we try to combat these challenges with specialized jelly tanks that we use. The animals are, so with the specialized jelly tanks, they're generally rounded, and the flow dynamic works where the animals are sitting in the middle of the tank, kind of not touching the corners. So with these specialized jelly tanks, the jellies inside them are very sensitive to their environment. So any little stuff that could be growing in a tank is really bad for them. Bacteria, which you can't see, diatoms, which are problematic algae, hydroids, which are stinging cells, can all grow in these tanks left unchecked. So every jelly tank has to be broken down and sterilized at least once a month. Our bigger cylinder, which is around the size of 2,200 gallons, so it's really big. We sterilize that one once every 3 months, where we have to I come in the morning, as a team does it, not just me, but I will take all the jellies out of that tank, which there's usually about 80 to 100 sea nettles, and then we generally drain it down to a bit, and then we sterilize it with really strong bleach. and then we have to clean it out, make sure there's bleach is gone, and then set it back up, and then put the animals back in. And that's just a reoccurring theme for healthy jellies is the sterilization of their exhibits.
So it's just keeping things super clean. And what do we feed them typically?
Oh, what a fantastic question. So jellies, jellies don't eat like jelly flakes like clownfish do. So they specialize on plankton. They're planktivores.
Okay.
And we have to mimic that through live foods feeds. So we have a specific aquarist whose job it is to culture millions of live foods every single day. And so the most common food item that we can offer are what's called brine shrimp. And then, so we hatch millions of brine shrimp every single day that go out to be fed to the jellies. But not all jellies eat the same thing. Some jellies have to eat larger prey, some jellies have to eat smaller prey. And so we actually have where we would be culturing moon jellies to feed to the other jellies that are what's called a medusivore, meaning it only eats other jellies. Some of the jellies specialize in eating small larval fish. Some of them specialize in eating small arthropods. A lot of thought goes into the feeding of the animals. Because one of my biggest goals is to try to mimic their natural diet as much as possible, because that's how you create the healthiest animals. And so I'm always doing research and R&D on how I can do that.
How would I don't want to say cannibalistic jelly, but how would a jelly that eats other jellies hunt for that jelly?
It's actually the same hunting strategy that all the jellies have. They have their long tentacles that are full of stinging cells called nidoblasts. And what they would do is they would trail those stinging cells and kind of capture animals that get entangled into it. So then that's the same thing with someone that an animal that would eat other jellies, another jelly that is that it would trap them with their long tentacles.
We get this question a lot on social media: is how do jellies not sting each other in the same habitat? So if they can sting other species, can they sting their same species?
No, they would have to evolve past that, because if they could sting the same species, they would sting themselves. So they,
Ouch.
so they do not sting the same species. So I am able to keep multiple specimens in the same tank.
Fascinating.
So are those stinging cells, they basically have an immunity to whatever is stinging for that individual species?
I don't know.
Okay, that's perfect. That's crazy to think about.
I think I read something that said like it doesn't. If they're touching the same species, it doesn't fire.
I don't know how that would be possible,
right?
Because it's tactile based, the firing of the nematocysts, so it would fire, but the animals wouldn't feel it. Maybe they do feel it and they just deal with it.
They're like, oh,
like you
bro.
do. Which is my next question: is how many times have you been stung today? Because I know it's pretty reoccurring. It's part of the job.
This is pretty late in my day, so probably at least 20 times, 50 times.
Does it hurt?
It depends. So it depends where you get stung and the animals that you're dealing with. If I know I can deal with certain specimens, I can be more carefree with handling them. And then other ones, I know it's going to be obnoxious, so I'm a little more careful. But it completely depends on the animals that I'm working on.
Which one has the worst sting of all the jellies we house here?
So, of all the ones that I've had here, there's a species of sea nettle that we don't have right now called the Indonesian sea nettle, and it had a really nasty sting.
Oh no!
Scientific name?
Chrysaor chinensis.
I thought I got him.
But so what it felt like is like if you've ever slammed your arm into a cactus, like really hard, that exactly what it felt like.
Ow!
Because it was one of those where it stung and then like shot up my spine because it was so unpleasant.
So much pain.
Yeah, but and then it went away really fast. Like there was no lingering effect, but it was obnoxious.
Weird. Oh, that's unfortunately.
Yeah.
But most of the jellies, or at least some of the jellies that we have here, like we have moon jellies in a touch tank. You know, like that's something people can just go and touch. Do they sting?
We do. I mean, technically they do sting because, like I said, it's tactile based that the stinging cells fire. But depending on what they eat, so moon jellies, they eat real small plankton. That's basically what their entire diet is composed of. So they don't really need a lot of stinging cells to capture our plankton. And so they are firing their harpoon-like stinging cells at you, but it doesn't go through your skin, so you can't feel it.
We're too strong.
Yeah, exactly.
We're too powerful.
Too strong for those moon jellies. The Cruella Ursula. I don't remember.
It was close. It really a Cruella, but
Thank you. Almost.
So, yeah, but yeah, and it's really dependent, like I said, on what they eat. Like things that eat bigger prey need to mobilize that prey. So because once it can capture it, like say something big like a fish can thrash, and that's going to hurt the animal. So it needs to immobilize it quickly. So that's why they would have a much stronger venom.
Got it. Speaking of stronger venom, what's the most dangerous jelly
In the world.
in the world?
The world.
The whole world.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I mean, members of the box jelly family
Yeah.
basically sting you and throw you into cardiac arrest. So yeah. So luckily off our coast, we do not have those ones. A lot of people find it interesting to know that we actually do have box jellies off our coast, but they don't really sting that bad. So it's not
fascinating.
really a problem.
It's more
But,
in like Australia.
Yes, I have seen reports of Portuguese man of war off our coast, which if they sting you, it's real bad.
I've been stung by those.
You haven't.
I have. I grew up in Hawaii. I
Sure
was stung
you
by
did.
them all the time. One of
Don't
them-
gaslight her.
I mean,
No, you
yes,
haven't.
you
That's
totally
not a real
have.
animal.
Well,
I
generally
just made it up.
speaking, well, number one, man o' war not true jellies,
No, they're siphonophores.
but we call them. Sometimes people call them jellies, but they'd be wrong to do that.
So you got stung by a jelly that wasn't a
No,
jelly.
I got stung by a Portuguese man o' war. They have them a lot in Hawaii, actually.
All
And
right.
a lot of them were very small, but one time one wrapped all the way around my leg, and I just remember dragging my leg down the beach and be like, Mom, I can't feel my leg anymore. So they're not great. I agree, and that is.
Fine. Sorry for calling you out.
Yeah. I grew up where the Portuguese man o' war were trying to kill me and eat me. And I was very small at the time, so they probably could have, actually. How
Yeah.
big do they get?
I mean, tentacle-wise, they probably reach 6 feet.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
The little swimming bladder is probably like 4 inches.
So this question came in from social media. What should you do if you get stung? What do you do when you get stung?
So, well,
Just kind of roll with it.
yeah, I just kind of
Just
go
goes
about my
on
day.
with it.
Don't
Yeah.
recommend. Don't recommend that.
Do
Yeah.
you build up an immunity to the stings over time?
I don't know if that's true or not.
Do you feel like you have? Are you superhuman?
He's Jelly Josh. Of course
He is Jelly
The
Josh.
most pathetic power of all
I
time.
can be stung by it.
Stinging is not as bad.
It's fine.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
I have to go home early.
My superpowers doesn't hurt quite as much as
Yeah.
it did yesterday.
But no, I don't know if that's an actual.
we'll
What
have to
was,
just
what was what was my question I was supposed to answer?
What do you do?
What
What do
should
you
you
do?
do if you
Okay.
get stung by a jelly?
The best thing to do, generally, you're at the beach. If you do that, go to the lifeguard station.
Yeah.
That's your best answer. Vinegar stuff can help neutralize the sting. So, like, if you're at the beach and someone has a picnic, you can throw like mustard on it. you know?
Mustard.
Yeah.
A little salad dressing.
Also, your best bet is to splash it with seawater to get the stinging cells off your body. So I assume you guys are leading me into talking about peeing on it. You don't have to pee on it. It doesn't work.
It's an urban legend.
Tis.
Do not pee on your jelly stings.
Speaking of those stinging cells, so after the jelly stings, the stinging cells can remain.
Yes.
So has there ever been a time where you might have had stinging cells on you? And
Yeah. So that's.
I'm leading you into a story I already know about.
Oh, totally. But yeah. So that's realistically for me in my day. That's how I get stung the most.
Oh.
Is that my hands generally don't feel it and I don't think about it, and then I'll
So
like.
your hands are immune.
Yeah, that's exactly what's. But so yeah. So the story that you're leading on me about is so there was one time in my early jelly career is we were looking for jellies out in the ocean and we spotted a really big egg yolk jelly. And egg yolk jellies, they can have a bell that's more than 15, 18 inches long, and that's just their bell. So tentacles, tons of them. They specialize in eating other jellies, so they'll encompass jellies with their tentacles. That's how big they are. And so I flopped out of the tank or out of the boat, and I kind of grabbed that guy and put him into a bag and handed it up to the deck. And so when I jumped back onto the boat, I did a good job, and I had all my scuba stuff on, or my wetsuit and my all my gear on. And what I did was I took off my mask, and then I took my hand, which I used to capture the jelly with a glove, and then wiped all the water out of my eyes, just running all the nematocysts right through my eyes, causing really bad sting. It was really painful. I had to try to splash it with water to try to get them out of my eyes, but that's probably my least favorite jelly encounter I've had.
A mistake you only make once.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Don't want that to happen again. So you worked with a number of species of jellies at the aquarium. Is there a jelly that you haven't worked with that you would like to one day?
Dream jelly.
There's actually tons and tons.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of like one of the fun things that I find in my job is that there's just any unlimited amount of I will just find this interesting jelly and then become obsessed with it and be like, that's the one I got to do next. It's so awesome. But yeah, realistically, box jellies would be a lot of fun. I'm not silly and would go after the worst stinging ones. I would go after the mildest stinging ones. But I think it would be an awesome story that we could tell to our guests, and an awesome species that we could actually bring in to show them. Which I think it's cool that jellies that have stories that I can kind of teach the public about.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
fascinating
you hear
stuff.
box jelly, and there's so many things in pop culture and just movies even that reference that species being so deadly, and the fact that we have them off our coast here in Long Beach, but it's a different type and it's not necessarily deadly. It's fascinating. Okay, cool. So we collected some questions from Instagram to chat with you about. So why does our ecosystem need jellies? What is their purpose? What is their role in the ocean?
So the role of jellies is generally keeping plankton numbers in check. Jellies generally it's a really delicate ecosystem that jellies live in. So they are a food item for a lot of species. Mola molas are the best example of that. If you guys know what that is, it's the ocean sunfish. They're the cutest fish in the ocean.
So cool. They're so cool.
Yeah,
They are objectively the cutest fish in the ocean.
That's fact. You've heard it here first. But yeah, so those guys specialize in eating jellies, so they're important for them. There's other species of butterfly fish and stuff like that.
Sea turtles too, right?
Sea turtles, yeah, a real obvious one that they munch down tons of jellies. But yeah, so they're an important food item for other species. But because the ecosystem's so delicate, if you get a big what we call a smack of jellies, but it's what we call a bloom of them as well. They can actually really tear down the plankton ecosystem. So it's really important to keep the animals in check.
Yeah, they're all connected. If the predator isn't predatory.
Yeah. Yeah, so some of the species that I like to work with are ctenophores, and one of the things that I learned with our comb jellies that we have is that they are really easy to be introduced into the other ecosystems. And in the Black Sea, they somehow got introduced. It's usually ballast water from ships, so it's not intentional, but would bring them in, and they would reproduce because they have no predators, and they would outcompete the not necessarily outcompete, but they would eat the fish larvae and cause real huge issues with the fish populations because there were so many of them eating them, and they couldn't get back past their plankton stage. And so what they ended up doing, which by every paper I've read seemed like it worked, was there's a species of ctenophore that specializes in only eating other ctenophores, which is called burrowee, and they introduced the burrowee to eat up all the comb jellies. And then after that, I mean, I'm sure the burrowee starved, but
Yeah. We have burrowies, or we've had burrowies here.
We have. That's one of my favorite species actually to work with, are burrowee. The reason for that is they're just so challenging, and then it's another one I don't know how to explain it on podcast, but they're hilarious looking.
Do jellies in a smack communicate with one another?
No.
Great.
Next question.
Awesome.
Why would they not communicate with one another?
Because they do not have the brain. So jellies are notorious for being brainless and spineless.
Me too.
So yeah, they don't have the
Don't talk
ability
about my friend
to
like that.
communicate with one another.
How are they able to stay together? Is it kind of like we're born together and we're just going to float together through this ocean?
Kind
clones
of,
of
yeah.
each other?
Yeah.
Like realistically, like so they are going to be born together because they're coming off. At least true jellies are coming off of those polyps that have been settled, and so because they just follow the currents. Currents are very consistent in the ocean. You can find a map of the currents, and you can see they will all follow the same currents, and that's generally why you find huge smacks of jellies on the ocean.
We're all in this together. What makes some jellies glow, and do you think that aids or hurts them when it comes to their predators?
So yeah, a lot of jellies do glow, and what it is it's so they'll have the bacteria in their tissue where if they are glowing, and actually it's aiding them. So what they're doing is they'll glow under the moonlight to attract plankton in. A good example of this is the flower hat jelly, which is a real popular jelly that we have that we don't currently have. Hopefully, soon we'll get more. But they actually, at the tips of their tentacles, they'll sit at the ocean floor at nighttime, and they'll wave the tips of their tentacles around, which have glowing tips. And then fish will see that and think I probably can eat that. And they grab the fish and then eat them.
Wow.
So the glowing actually helps them in attracting prey.
It's like a rave.
Yeah, it's exactly what it
It's
is.
jelly raves. Cool. Yeah, I would think that maybe it was the opposite. Like it's glowing in the ocean, and an animal that preys on that specific type of jelly sees it, and it's like, oh yeah, I can see it in the dark.
So evolutionarily, that wouldn't make sense.
Okay. Cool.
Josh is like, no.
No.
wrong. I have a question. I have heard that some people say, oh, well, the oldest animal ever is this immortal jelly. And there's some jelly, apparently, that lives forever. Can you tell us what the deal is with the deal?
Yeah, I can tell you what the deal is with the deal. So yeah, that is a true story. So there is a species of jellies which is we call the immortal jellies. Tortopsis, before you ask, that's the
Thank you.
genus.
Boom. Needed
I don't remember
that.
the species name though. But
Got him.
so yeah, so what's kind of fun with that jelly? It's like a little jelly. It's a hydrozoan species, but they're about the size of a quarter, max size, probably
tiny.
nickel actually. And so what it'll do is so it'll get to the medusa stage, which should be the end of its life cycle, and instead of dying, if it causes stress, it'll revolt back to its polyp stage. So it'll find a place to settle, and it'll settle again. And then when conditions are optimum again, it'll produce the medusa once more. So in theory, it can run back and forth between those two stages and essentially just regenerate and live forever.
Is it cloning in the polyp stage, so it also creates more of them?
No. From my understanding.
No. That's interesting.
It's beautiful.
Well, that's just...
You can edit that part out, right?
I will not.
I will not. I kind of like that there are some things we just don't even know yet. You know, like there are so many jellies out there. How many species of jellies are there?
So no one really knows how many exact species of jellies there are. It's estimated that I think it was 15,000, give or
my
take
goodness.
a zero at the end.
Lots.
But because jellies inhabit just about every ecosystem, you're always finding brand new jellies. There's specimens of jellies that the Monterey Bay Aquarium has attained that are found so deep that if they're exposed to oxygen in the water, it kills them.
Wow.
So they have to make sure that they strip all oxygen from the water.
They
It's
just
the
adapt
opposite.
to live wherever.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Fascinating. That's so cool. Why do some jellies have shorter arms than others?
Oh, good, an easy question.
Yeah.
So tentacle length and oral arm length is really dependent on what they're eating. So with like egg yolk jellies, they consume other jellies. They don't necessarily have to have really long trailing tentacles. And so what they need to do is have a lot of short tentacles so they can really engulf their prey. Other species like hold on, my brain is thinking, sea nettles, which would be eating a lot of arthropods as well as other jellies. They can have longer tentacles to help capture plankton that are just drifting. So it's really about what they eat. Like I said, box jellies, they can have relatively long tentacles, but like, you know, in regards to how big their bell is, but it's not that long, and it's because, you know, they're needing to capture larger prey, so they need to immobilize it. So they don't need a long tentacle for that. So it's all about feeding.
What they're eating is how determines the length of their arms.
When you come to the aquarium, you can touch moon jellies, and we see them outside in Harbor Terrace. They have so many stomachs sometimes. What is the purpose of a jelly having one stomach?
What a great time for me to correct you.
Okay. Yeah, perfect.
They don't have so many stomachs, in fact. Moon jellies only have
I'll
one
go.
stomach.
I'll leave.
But I get this question a lot, and I get how it's misinterpreted or misunderstood. So the horseshoe-shaped things on the animal is actually its gonads. But so those gonads, that I can actually tell the gender of the animals by the color of them.
So they're male and female?
Yeah. So Medusa are male and female, so they do have specific genders. But yeah, so those actually lay inside a central stomach. So the whole cavity is their stomach.
Got it.
But yeah, so they will have, so in theory, so what makes a jelly is it has bilateral symmetry, meaning if you split it in half, it's identical on each side. But you get these weird genetic mutations where they'll have extra gonads. And it's not hurting or harming the animal in any way. It's just kind of cool looking. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it does happen out in the moon jelly touch. But like a moon jelly is supposed to have 4 gonads. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I said, it's a genetic mutation and can cause it.
Is there anything that you want to share about jellies that we haven't touched on?
No, I mean, I could go on and on about how cool jellies are. I mean, I've been doing it this, like I said, 12 years. It's clearly an interest and passion of mine because it's totally fun. But yeah, that's all the questions you guys have.
That's it. It is all the questions we have. If you have time, I just want to talk a little bit about sustainability in aquaculture is a huge portion of what Josh is doing here. And sustainability in aquaculture just means that we are trying to culture a lot of our own animals here so that mitigates some of the collecting from the ocean that we might typically do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Jelly populations are not really being impacted by collecting, but at the same time, being able to culture animals in-house is really cool. And that's a very specialized skill set. If any of our listeners have jellies, I'm sure you know how difficult they can be to care for. I know that there are people who are pretty experienced hobbyists who have kept tanks and kept, animals for their whole lives and cannot keep jellies alive. So it is a skill set that we're very lucky to have here. And I think it's really cool to see the entire industry moving in the direction of more sustainability and being able to breed animals in-house and have these animals here rather than going out and collecting them. Although we do learn a lot about different species when we bring in new ones here. So
yeah.
Thanks, Josh, for doing all of that and for being our Jelly Josh that we have here on site and for your jelly sting immunity powers that you maybe have. We'll follow
Only
up.
in the hands.
Yeah.
Only in the hands.
In a future episode, we'll follow up on how immune you are at that point, and we can talk more about it.
That'll be next season.
But,
cool. Thank you so much, Josh, for being on your
thanks for
podcast
having
today.
me.
That was
Yeah.
awesome.
Thanks.
Aquarium of the Podcific is brought to you by Aquarium of the Pacific, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. In 2023, the aquarium celebrates 25 years of connecting millions of people worldwide to the beauty and wonder of our ocean planet. Head to aquariumofpacific.org to learn more about our 25th anniversary celebration. Keep up with the aquarium on social media at Aquarium Pacific on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
This podcast is produced by Erin Lundy, Madeline Walden, and Scott Shaw. Our music is by Andrew Reitzma, and our podcast art is by Brandy Kenny. Special thanks to Cecile Fisher, Anita Valles, and our audiovisual and education departments, and to all of our amazing podcast guests for taking time out of their day to talk about the important work that they do. Podcific wouldn't be possible without the support of the aquarium's donors, members, guests, and supporters. Thanks for listening.